This episode of Author Stories is brought to you by the Writing Mastery Academy. Founded by Jessica Brody, author of the best-selling plotting guide, Save the Cat Writes a Novel. The Writing Mastery Academy features online, on-demand writing courses, including the official Save the Cat Writes a Novel companion course, novel fast drafting, crafting dynamic characters, and productivity hacks for writers, to name just a few, plus monthly live webinars on various writing topics. Go to jessicabrody.com/Hank to learn more and get your first month of unlimited access to all the content for just $6. That's right, just $6. jessicabrody.com/Hank.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey Doctorow,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Jess Montgomery on the show with me. She has an amazing new book. It's called The Stills, and it's the third book in the Kinship series. And this is a must-have for your to-be-read pile for sure. This is such a fun adventure. Welcome to the show, Jess.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. Jess, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh my goodness. So I'm one of these irritating people who always wanted to write. So my first memory of writing something was I wrote a little book. I was probably maybe 6 or 7, called The Fireman. And it was about a fireman who rescued a girl's cat from a tree. So stellar premise when you're 7.
Oh, absolutely.
And I, what's funny is I bound it in red construction paper to make a cover, and and stapled the edge, the side, and I put up in the right-hand corner 1 cent. I guess I was underselling myself. And on the inside front cover, I very presumptively wrote, published by Little Golden Books, because I had all these little golden books. And then I sold it to my aunt.
Oh, that's amazing.
For that penny. And I actually forgot about it until years and years later. She passed away. And my uncle remarried, and his new wife found a box of my aunt's, like she kept every birthday card, Christmas card, letter anybody ever sent her, and tucked in this box was The Fireman.
That is,
and yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, so I've always, storytelling is just, I think it's part of everybody's DNA. It's how I make sense of the world. I've just always hung on to it. But I always sort of bookend that story with another story about my great-grandmother who lived in the same part of Appalachia her whole life. And we didn't know that she wrote poetry until after she passed away. She lived to like 103. And in her 90s, she developed a little crush on the 80-something cute guy at the corner grocery store. And she wrote him all these love poems and other poems too. So, as far as we know, she started writing in her 90s. So I kind of love that, because it just says, you can start writing whenever you want.
I love that so much. We talk a lot on the show, and you kind of alluded to this already, but your sense of place, and where we're from, and how that kind of bleeds over into the types of stories that we tell, or that sort of stuff. How do you feel like your connection to place affects you as a storyteller?
Setting is such an important part of a story to me. It's a character in and of itself.
Right.
We're shaped by where we come from, where we end up. Sometimes that's a different place. Sometimes it's the same place. And certainly for the kinship novels, they're set in southeastern Ohio, which is a part of the Appalachian region. And I have already alluded to the fact my family of origin's from Appalachia. I happen to be, first generation Buckeye in a non-Appalachian part of Ohio. But as I was growing up, my parents would say I was a late in life baby. So I was the first person on either side of the family not to be from a particular place in eastern Kentucky. So I got teased about that just a little bit. But they would say, we're going on down home. And going on down home meant going to where my grandma Lou lived in West Liberty, Kentucky. And so I always kind of thought of it as home. But at the same time, since I wasn't born there, I wasn't sure, was I even allowed to write books set in Appalachia? So when I came across the genesis for the kinship stories, I suddenly felt very like it was okay that I could do this. And I felt comfortable with it. And it was really fun because, the turns of phrase and the memories of what it meant to go on down home kind of came back to me. It was nice to pull that in.
One of my grandfathers is from Kentucky, from Northeast Kentucky. And I've always had a very powerful draw to that area. There's something about that, and the rest of my family are from South Mississippi, down close to the Gulf Coast. But there's this interesting pull in this tension between those two cultures that I think there's fascinating stories, from both sides. But coming from a family of storytellers like you have, were there any writers per se in your family, or was storytelling just kind of part of your family DNA? How does your family, how do they, what does storytelling mean to your family?
That's a really interesting question. So the great grandmother I alluded to had 9 children. And one of them obviously was my grandmother, but the youngest child, my great uncle JD, was a poet. And so he, of all those 9 kids, went on not just to high school, but to college and graduate school, and became an English professor, I think at University of Cincinnati. And he would come up and visit us every now and then. And if he had a new book of poetry out, he would bring that along and give it to his nephew, my dad, and to our family. And for me, I think it just affirmed that, it was possible to have a book published, and to, work in the world of literature. Now, my dad had what we would call now dyslexia, or some kind of reading disability. So he was hampered in that area, but he could spin a yarn. He could tell a story, and he loved to tell stories. So I think if there's a genetic component, it would have definitely come from my dad's side. And that influence. Education was super important as well to that side of my family. So there was a lot of encouragement about, get a good education.
Sure. So Jess, as someone who, comes from a family where storytelling is ingrained, it's obviously important. It was important to you from a very young age, and you kind of knew that this was going to be a path that your life would take. And now we kind of jump forward to you're publishing now the 3rd book in the Kinship series. The strange thing happens. We have these these desires and these visions of what a storytelling life will look like. And then somewhere, around your early 20s, this thing called life happens, and you start a family, and there are bills that have to be paid, and all of this crazy stuff happens. But invariably, for those that are, bit by the storytelling bug, it comes back around and knocks on our door again. What was that like for you? What brought you back around to the place where you are now?
Yeah. Well, I've always written. I've never stopped. I didn't take a break since I was 6. I've always written in some form or fashion. Hired professionally as a technical writer for a while, and then marketing communications. But for this particular series, it was in just finding the story, and knowing I just had to tell this story with the first book in the series, which is called The Widows, and then realizing, thanks to my editor pointing it out, that I'd created this world of characters, and that there was so much more I could do with what I'd created.
So you not only are you a novelist, but you also write. You're a columnist as well. How did you get started in writing nonfiction and sharing your love of storytelling with a wider audience?
Right. I actually realized I'm reorganizing my office. So I started going through some old clippings and realized I've been a freelance weekly columnist for the Dayton Daily for almost 20 years. So I had a column under a different name that was about like family life. It was, kind of Irma Bombeck-esque. I would never say I was like Irma Bombeck, but in that same field. And of course, Dayton area, which is where I'm from, is where Irma Bombeck is from. And really the way that column came about was, for a while, the Dayton Daily would have occasional columns by readers. You could send something in and they'd take a look, and sort of a slice of life column by a variety of writers and readers. And every now and then I'd send something in for that. And one day I got a call from one of the editors at the newspaper, and he said, we're looking for a regular humor column. We realize we don't represent the woman's point of view in our columns. Most of our columnists are male that are doing slice of life type writing. Would you like to give it a try? And I literally laughed. I thought it was a joke because I've freelanced for newspapers and whatnot, but I've never been a full-time regular journalist. And then I realized he wasn't kidding, and so I said, now I look back and I think, goodness, that was a little shy, but I said, okay, I'll give it a try, but you have to run it as far back in the newspaper as you possibly can, because I was just afraid that I wouldn't be able to do something once a week. And I was afraid that nobody would like it. And so I thought, if we could just put it in like with the classifieds, then I'd be safe. So he's like, fine, we'll put it in the, like the last page of the life section. And so that's what they did. And then about a month and a half later, he said, we really need an answer. And if you do this, you're going to be on the front of the life section on Mondays, not at the back. And by then I was so hooked. And I think I really liked having a weekly deadline to write to, that I said, okay, I'll do that. So I did for 10 years. And then about 9.5 years into that, by then our kids were getting a little older. It was getting harder to find material, because it was about family life. I was always the butt of the joke. I made sure not to poke too much fun at my husband and kids, or, it was about balancing work and life, that kind of thing. And the editor called me and said, well, we've done a sort of focus group in the area, and readers really want to know more about the literary life of the Dayton area. We're a pretty vibrant area for the arts in general, and have a lot of writers and writer events. And so, that editor asked, would I be interested in writing that column? And I said, sure. But once again, I thought there can't be enough to fill a column every week in a, relatively small city like Dayton. But as it turns out, I've never had a gap. There's never been a problem. There's just so much going on in the Dayton area. And, on those rare occasions where, there isn't something quite going on, I can always dig into the Dayton area's history. And yeah, that column's gone almost 10 years as well. So,
are you looking for software that helps you bring your novel to life? Novelize is a web-based writing app which allows you to access your work on any device with a browser and an internet connection. Write from your desktop, laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Just get the novel written. Say goodbye to sticky notes. With our notebook on the side, you can keep track of all the important information you need to write your novel. We keep distractions to a minimum, help you track your progress, and encourage you to write more novels. You can even use the same notebook for your novels in a series. Outline, write, or organize your novel by switching between modes. You can write your outline notes while you're writing, and you can move scenes and chapters around anytime in the organize mode. Choose between the dark and light theme to help prevent eye strain so that you can stay immersed in your book. Novelize, the app for writers by writers.
Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website. Developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates, PubSite is the new easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web.
Have you found that that having that column has sparked your other writing? Do you feel like that your column writing, your nonfiction writing, informs your fiction writing? Do you feel a connection there between those two?
I actually don't, in terms of ideas or writing style. I mean, the column I write now is, it's a column, but it's very straightforward. Partly because I've only got about 700 to 800 words, which isn't a ton. But what it definitely has done is, if I start to think, oh, I can't write another chapter, or oh, this is really hard, I think, you have been writing a regular column every week for 20 years. Yes, you can put yourself in the chair and you can produce words. They may not be pretty. You may end up deleting 90% of them so that you can create better words later, but you can get copy on the page. You can do this because you do it every week, because you have to, because you have a deadline. So in a very practical way, yes, it has helped me.
So tell me about the Kinship series. I'm fascinated, Jess, by the beginnings of things. And I know listeners are tired of me hearing me talk about this, but it's almost like magic in a way, that one moment the story does not exist. It literally is not a thing. And then a character walks onto the stage of your mind, or you start playing the what if game that writers do. Maybe you see a news story and you say, well, what if this would have happened? And then all of a sudden, a story, takes shape, and these characters become real, and these situations become real. So, what was that instigating thing for the Kinship series that brought this world to life for you?
Well, I was actually doing a little bit of research to figure out where in southeastern Ohio my husband and I could take our younger daughter hiking. She had gone off to college at Ohio University, which is in southeastern Ohio, and she majored in outdoor education and was a rugby player. So as you can imagine, very, very physically fit, very athletically inclined, very outdoors woman type of child. And she didn't have a car though at college. So getting to like hiking areas away from the campus was problematic because there's not a county bus system over there. So I thought, okay, I need to do some research. I have to be very careful and find a place to hike that will be interesting to her and that also won't lead to her having to call 911 for me because I do not play rugby. I am not particularly athletic. And there's not a ton of cell phone reception on some of those hills over there. So in digging around, like literally looking for like state parks, places to hike, I ran across an article on the Vinton County visitor site. And Vinton County is one county like north west of Athens County, where Ohio University is. And there was this little article that was about Maud Collins, who was the first female sheriff in the state of Ohio in 1925. And she became sheriff when her husband was killed in the line of duty. And the next female sheriff, by the way, in Ohio was in 1976. The third female sheriff, there have been deputy sheriffs and female police officers, of course, but then the third county sheriff in the state of Ohio was around 2000, and then we just got our fourth one with this past election. So they're few and far between. And I just saw this article and was just struck by the notion of a female sheriff at any time, but in 1925 and in such a rural area. And like I said, in real life, there was no mystery about how Mrs. Collins' husband died. But like you said earlier, I got that what if question. What if there were? What if she doesn't know why he died? What if she knows he was murdered, but doesn't know who could have done this? And I was just going through some difficult times with my family of origin on my mother's side. Not caring for how some folks were treating my mother. And I felt this sort of like, well, if I were her, this female sheriff, I'd want vengeance. And I kind of want vengeance now. And so that just sort of set me down this path of brainstorming and coming up with ideas. And, by the time I ended up writing the novel, it wasn't a novel about vengeance at all. It was about finding your way back to community and redemption, which I think is a better outcome than vengeance in any case. But that was the genesis for it. And like I said earlier, I wasn't comfortable until now to write a story set in Appalachia. But I think in knowing that that I could set it in my home state, but also Appalachia, and draw on, kind of my roots, made the story just sort of come to life for me.
What is it about this area of Appalachia that makes for such magical stories? What are some of the things about this place that are so exciting and fascinating to you?
It's been exciting to me to realize how in such a remote area, and particularly in the 20s, you would think in a way it would be tucked away and untouched by the bigger events in the world, outside of the area. But that's not the case. It's fascinating to think about how big sweeping changes or events, whether it's prohibition or women's rights or, unionization or what was happening in coal mining, could reach down into very individual lives in a very personal way and affect the outcome of these lives and relationships. So that's been really fascinating. And it's really been interesting to dig into the area and realize there's some really interesting, history, whether it's prohibition history or darker elements of, our national history playing out in that and other areas, like in my second novel in the series. And I just think there's something beautiful about Appalachia in general. The hills, the hollers, they're kind of, it's a really tough terrain, and yet it's really a gentle terrain in some ways. And of course, the culture runs deep with community is so important. And I'm really fascinated by the tension between community and individuality, and how does, where does that tension play out, and how do you resolve that tension? That ends up being kind of a theme of any of the books that I've written so far.
So we're now talking about the third book in the series, The Stills. When you first started writing that first book, did you have any idea that the story would expand to where it is now?
I did not. In fact, I kind of thought of it as a standalone. And when I was chatting with my editor, after my agent found a great publishing home with Minotaur for my book, I was chatting with my editor, and we knew that they wanted me to do a second book, and I just assumed it would be a standalone. And my editor said, well, that's fine, but have you considered writing, she asked the same question you just did. Have you considered writing this as a series? And I said, no. And she said, well, if you thought of it as a series, what would you, envision? And I said, well, I really liked the Time Life books when I was a kid, the decade by decade books. Right. And this first one is set in the 20s. What if the next one is set in the 30s and 40s and so on? And she was very quiet on her end of the phone. And she said, how long would you like to write for us? And I said, well, as long as you want me to, I guess. And she said, we do like that you write a historical series, and very soon you'll be writing contemporary and then futuristic science fiction. So could we rethink this just a little? And I said, I need to think about this. So I went away and I thought about it, and I came back to her and I said, all right, how about if we space the timing of each story by about a year or so? And that gives us plenty of time to play with over the next, couple of decades if we want to. And, find within each year that I've set a story, what's going on in the bigger scheme of American or world history that might be touching on the lives of these people in kinship. And so we agreed that was what we would do. But she pointed out, she said, I got to the end of this and I wanted to know not just what would happen next to Lily, who's the sheriff that's inspired by Maud, but how will these other people's lives play out? You've created a huge cast of characters. How will their lives play out? And that's when it kind of hit me that, I named the county seat Kinship, but that's a very symbolic word and name. And the book is about community and individuality, and how those two can interplay. What if each book had as the narrator Lily, the sheriff, and then someone from the community, a different person per book, but somebody that you've met, somebody that, might have been a minor character in a previous book, gets to be a narrator alongside Lily. So That's worked out very well because that way I can explore this world, but have kind of Lily as the anchor or the center of the stories, and at the same time have another narrator who might see things a little different than Lily does. And yeah, so I hadn't planned on this, but it worked out beautifully.
So, Jess, do you consider yourself a planner or a pantser? And those are terms that we kind of throw around loosely in the writer community. But do you write by the seat of your pants, or do you have an overarching plan and meticulously have these people's lives and futures planned out?
I'm somewhere in the middle. I actually think we're all both plotters and planters.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. I think most people are in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, I do. I have to think I know, and I say I have to think I know the ending. But I usually end up surprising myself and changing the ending. But if I give myself an ending to write toward, these are mysteries, so I have to think I know who's guilty and what their motives were. That helps me have something to write toward. And then I think a lot about what motivates each character. Like, why are they, what drives them? So I try not to write characters that I've manipulated to fit a plot. I try to have the plot organically come out of who these people are. Yeah. Obviously there is some manipulation, but I try to make sure the plots are very character driven. And then what I like to do is see, who is in conflict with who, who is going to oppose Lily, not necessarily because she's the sheriff, but who has a different point of view than her that would come into conflict, even if there were no mystery to solve. And so that kind of generates some rich interaction and scenes. And then I just sort of start brainstorming scenes and trying to put them in some sort of order so that by the time I am writing actual, copy, I have a good sense of, I have a net beneath me, we'll put it that way. I've kind of woven a safety net of, I sort of know where I know where the plot's going. I don't know exactly how I'm going to get across that tightrope, but I know what the interactions are. I kind of have a sense of theme. Theme tends to develop in the revision, because then I'll have an aha moment of, oh, that's what this book is actually about. Okay.
I love it when that happens.
Yeah. I startled my husband one day. We were cleaning out the garage this past summer, as one does in the middle of, a pandemic. And
oh yeah.
And we're working away. I'm cleaning some shelves, and I suddenly burst out, "It's about faith." And he's like, "What?" "Oh, the book I'm writing." Okay.
Sure it is, Jess. Hand me that box.
Exactly.
Oh, the since there is some space between the books in the Kinship series, can you pick up any book in the series and jump into the story, or do you really need to start with the Widows, then go to the Hollows, then the Stills? How would you direct people to get into your series?
I very much try to write them so that they can each be read as a standalone. And each book ends so that you can see that if there weren't another book, the characters are left in a satisfying place. Yeah. And yet there's enough, like it's a big cast, it's a big world. So you can kind of also see where there could be more stories. But I do try to write them so that the people can, they can pick up the Stills and read it and not read the first two, and they'd be fine. Now, the tension that creates as a writer is there are lots of people who like to read a book series in order. So I have to be very careful about, I'm giving just enough backstory so that I'm not giving away the previous books, but just enough that if you're a reader who you just want to read the Stills, You don't want to read the other two, that you know what's going on, but not so much that if you've read the first two, you read the stills and think, well, she already said this in the previous two books. So it's a bit of a juggle, but people can read them in any order, really.
I know that your publisher loves the Kinship series and loves the idea that you're working on, but how far ahead are you thinking about these characters in this place? Do you have a grand plan that you're writing towards?
Kind of. I just thinking about Appalachian history. After World War II, there was kind of a great diaspora out of parts of, at least in my family, which is, how I ended up being the first. I was born much later than World War II, but like I said, I was a late in life baby. But my family all left, like in the late 40s, early 50s, and came up north to Ohio, and a few went south to Florida, and a few stayed. So, but Appalachia changed a lot after World War II. So I kind of see these characters up through World War II. Now that could mean a lot more books. That could mean a handful of more books, depending on, how far ahead in time I want to skip. But I actually did sit down once I realized, okay, there are going to at least be 4 books in this series, maybe more. And just wrote out a timeline, especially thinking about the younger kids. As they get older, they're going to have personalities that come forth. They're going to have their own conflicts. That the kids start out fairly young in these books, but they'll be coming of age in the Great Depression. Some of them will be the right age to go off and fight in World War II. So it's been kind of interesting to think about, even if Lily never has another mystery to solve, where will these lives go? So I have planned that out.
Well, the new book is called The Stills. It is the 3rd book in the Kinship series. Jess, I love this series. I think people are going to have so much fun with it. We're going to put links to it in the show notes of this episode where folks can grab it in Kindle edition or audiobook or actual paper. If people are still excited about reading actual paper, I know I am.
Me too.
But if people are just learning about you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, where can they find you online?
Oh, they can find me on my website, which is jessmontgomeryauthor.com. I'm pretty active on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. It's also just Jess Montgomery Author, and a Facebook group. I interact with people on the Jess Montgomery Friends group. So Facebook is where I do a lot of interacting. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, but really to connect with me personally, Facebook is the way to go. Or, they can find out a lot more about me and my books on my website, and also how to contact me via email.
Excellent. We're going to put links to all that stuff in the show notes of this episode. Jess, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Authors, if you're looking for a partner to help ensure that your book is the best it can possibly be, look no further than Pico's House. Crystal and her staff make a conscious effort to be critical yet courteous. They also strive to make the business side of things run smoothly so that you can rest easy knowing that your manuscript is in capable hands. Whether you need beta reading, developmental editing, a manuscript critique, line editing, copy editing, or proofreading, Pico's House is the one-stop shop for you. Check them out today at picoshouse.com to get started. Dream Author by Sophie Hannah is an immersive 14-month coaching program for writers at any and every level of experience, and also for those of you who want to write and are just waiting for the right encouragement and guidance to get you started. Your writing dreams should make you happy. For so many of us, our dreams are not a source of happiness. Instead, they cause us stress, guilt, frustration, and even shame. Here's the great news. All of these feelings are natural and all writers experience them. The problem, though, is that when your writing dreams bring you more anxiety than joy, it affects your resolve and your productivity, and you end up not taking the action you need to take in order to propel your dreams in the right direction so that they can stand a strong chance of coming true. That's why Sophie created the Dream Author Coaching Program to teach anyone who is passionate about writing how to change the way they build, think about, and pursue their writing dreams in order to become their own most powerful ally and advocate for the rest of their writing life. And more great news. Once you've learned that skill, it lasts forever. Visit dreamauthorcoaching.com to get started today. The Bad Company Complete Series Omnibus, Books 1 through 7. Humanity's Greatest Export, Justice. Space is a dangerous place, even for the wary, especially for the unprepared. The aliens have no idea. Here comes the Bad Company. The Bad Company Book 1, Colonel Terry Henry Walton takes his warriors into battle for a price in this first installment of the Bad Company. He believes in the moral high ground and is happy to get paid for his role in securing it. Set in the Cutherian Gambit universe, Terry, Char, and their people humans, werewolves, were-tigers, and vampires form the core of the Bad Company's direct action branch, a private conflict solution enterprise. Join them as they fight their way across Tissakinnon IV, where none of the warring parties were what they expected. The 7-book series omnibus includes The Bad Company, Blockade, Price of Freedom, Liberation, Destroyer, Discovery, Overwhelming Force. Grab the complete Bad Company series by Craig Martell now. How to Be a Badass Witch by Michael Anderle. Virtutus Gloria Mercies. Translation: Glory is the reward of valor. Fed up with playing the normal game, recent university graduate, ex-cum laude, ex-soccer star, ex-popular, and mostly broke Cara Madano changes her life when she decides to research how to be a witch and believes it. Cara didn't want to go back east and deal with her overbearing mom, so when university was done, she stayed behind in Los Angeles. Little did she realize how controlling moms can be from the other side of the country. Feeling a little desperate to make her own way, she buys a few books on business, and one on a lark, How to Be a Badass Witch. That's when the trouble started. Find out just what trouble a young woman can get into when the magic just might be real. How to Be a Badass Witch by Michael Anderle.